Hi, my name's Kieran at One Zen Personal Training. I'm just going to briefly talk to you about some common running injuries, especially with regards to the knee. And the knee's a funny one because if you go and see quite a few physios that are not necessarily sporting related, they'll do an assessment on the knee. You'll say, oh, I've got knee pain. They'll do the assessment on the knee and nothing else. And they may come to the conclusion that you've hurt your tendon, which goes from the kneecap here and attaches to this point here. They may say, oh, that's under loaded pressure, it's inflamed, it hurts. So they'll give you exercises for that. And they may say, oh, you need to go on a leg extension machine, so you need to sit down and do this movement. Will it strengthen that area? Yeah, sure. But will it solve the problem? Definitely not. Okay, so it's important to know one of the reasons, or a few of the reasons why we get injured in the knee when we're running. Now, first point is, and you have to appreciate that we're dictated by the laws of physics and gravity, and unfortunately gravity is always trying to pull us down. So all of our muscles, our nervous system is designed by nature to resist that pull and allow us to function in normal our three-dimensional world. So as I'm running, all I'm doing is planting my foot and then resisting that downward force and trying to move forwards. In essence, that's what I'm trying to do. So when we're looking at the knee, in essence, that's not the area that we should even be looking at. We should be looking at what's happening at the foot, what's happening at the hip. Because this joint here, the knee, is biomechanically relatively simple. Okay? It's very smart, but relatively simple. So as my foot hits the ground, whether it's heel or forefoot, it hits the ground, I must make sure that I have correct range of motion through my ankle. If I don't have correct range of motion, I try and hit the ground and it's restricted, then I'm not going to be able to generate enough force in order to propel myself off. To put it another way, my Achilles, which sits here, okay, my Achilles blends into my soleus, which is a muscle that sits under your calf. Now as I run, as I land, there should be an elastic stretch on that muscle. There should be enough elastic stretch that allows energy to be stored and then allowed it to be used to propel me straight off again. If I can't store sufficient amount of elastic energy through this muscle and through these tissues, then the muscles of my quadriceps, my hamstrings, my glute max, which sits here, and the rest of the hip complex have to work a lot harder, for one, which then slows me down over prolonged running, but also my Achilles has an increasing amount of load going through it. This may result in an Achilles tendonitis, which is an inflammation of the Achilles, which you'll notice when you stop running. So you'll stop running, later that evening you'll think, oh God, my Achilles really hurts. That's the start of that process. Maybe the first thing you should look at is the range of motion at your ankle, what we call dorsiflexion. So as my foot hits the ground, my knee is just going to keep traveling. Okay, my knee's going to keep traveling until these tissues here, then my quadricep at the front and my hamstring and glute at the back with some hip flexor will decelerate that movement, especially the hamstrings. They will decelerate that movement and then allow the other leg to follow through and then pick me up. Okay. Now, if I don't have a good relationship in my hip, my quadricep here, and my hamstring at the back, then I can't help you anymore. You may just collapse in on yourself. Okay? This may result in your knee coming inwards like this. So as you land, it comes in instead of forwards. It comes in. Now, if my knee's collapsing inwards because the muscles of the hip can't decelerate that movement, then if you notice what happens at my foot, if you notice what happens down here, if my muscles of the hip can't help me, is that my foot collapses inwards. This could result in plantar fasciitis, If you've never heard of it, it means you haven't had it. Be grateful for that. This could mean some sort of IT band syndrome. So you get what we call runner's knee. So imagine your glute max, the big muscles at the back here, and TFL, which is a little muscle which sits and blends into the IT band. The IT band goes all the way down and sits on the head of the fibula. So it goes past your knee. Okay, so you wouldn't think that your glute max would attach in down to your lower leg. So 85% of the glute max does that. So straight away you can see how the hip influences the lower leg without us doing anything, okay, by sheer attachment. But as my knee collapses inwards, the IT band becomes more taut as the muscles up here have to work harder to try and pull me back out of that position. So as I'm running, I land. If I'm collapsing inwards, these muscles here have to pull me out of that position before I can step forward. What this means is that your hip here at the side may start hurting a bit more. The piriformis, which is deep underneath your buttocks, may have to work harder to stabilize. It also means it has this knock-on effect completely, and sometimes you don't even recognize these things in your body until it's too late. So you could get things like a trochanteric bursitis, which is an inflammation of a fat pad around your hip. You could get pain in your knee, in your foot. Basically, a lot of things can go wrong that will prevent you from training and enjoying what it is to run. Now, some of the reasons why this happens could be the width of your hips and what we call your Q angle, more common in females. It could be, and what I see a lot of these days, in the way that people do their cross training or the training which is supposed to help them with running. So a lot of people go into gyms these days and do what they consider to be strength and conditioning for running, but the reality is they come straight into the gym, they sit down on a bit of kit, and then they may do some leg extensions, they may do some leg curls for the hamstrings, they may do some leg press, but all the while they're just sitting down. So they're creating and developing these very poor relationships between all of these muscles up the leg. All they want to do is resist the pull of gravity and then use that energy to propel you off. If you really understand or appreciate how the human body works, just by moving around, and know that when we're running, it normally takes every muscle in the body as well as the natural movement in the body to do that, you will fast come away from the machines where you sit down and move into more of a free weights or body weight based movement exercise plan. Exercises such as lunges in multiple directions, single leg squats, or even freestanding squats if you want to load the glutes, the hamstrings and the quads a bit more. Okay? Calf raises and eccentric loading calf raises, and anything in between. But the reality is the last thing that you should be doing is sitting down at a machine, purely because you are opening the door for injury in the long run, and you will come and sit on a couch that looks like this and pay someone a vast amount of money to try and prevent an injury which could have been prevented in the first place. If you have any questions based on anything I've said and I haven't bored you to tears, then please contact me at Kieran at one-zenpt.co.uk or visit my website www.one-zenpt.co.uk. My name's been Kieran. Thank you very much.